Hi, everyone. Welcome to our weekly book study group. My name is Bill Free, and our co-host this week is Jenny Beal. Hi, Jenny.
Hi, Bill. Hi, everyone. It's lovely to be with you again.
Well, for you all that don't know, Jenny was a co-host for over a year, a full year, every once a month for I think it was the presenter series. No, it was TGF
The
TV.
perfume of, oh yes, the once a month for
TGF
TV.
And it was the Perfume of Silence. We have that in our catalog on billfree.com, where we met and we did 30 weeks of the Perfume of Silence. And it's really great to have Jenny back again this week. She also shared as co-host on rotation and other times on other books of Rupert's. So she's very familiar with Rupert's teaching, and she's a great resource for all of us. I used to call her our resource, our librarian for Rupert's content, because she knows all of his videos about this topic or that topic. So if you don't know Jenny Beal, this is our amazing Jenny, and another Jenny. We have another Jen that was one of our co-hosts a couple of weeks ago, Jen Sheehan, who's probably here. And we're going to look this week at Chapter 8, The Joy of Being. And thank you, Jenny, for agreeing to be this chapter. You were originally, as you remember, the first one. You switched with Lisa. Now we're looking at The Joy of Being. I know you're going to be as amazing on this one as pick any chapter. And so, Jenny, let's get started with, let's see what page we are. We're page 73 in the book, and I'm not sure on Kindle.
Right, yes. I've got the book numbers, luckily, because Susan very kindly provided me the book numbers, although I have got a Kindle.
Okay,
so,
good.
Yes.
So we have one question that came in. We have Rick's. Rick, if you want to post it in the chat, that'd be great. We'll pick it up in about 30 minutes. And if anyone has any questions or you want to raise your hand, we'll be glad to take your questions halfway through.
Yes. So I just wanted to make a couple of general points before we launch straight into Chapter 8, and really referring back to some of the things Rupert said in the first webinar that we had. And firstly, that this book is designed for contemplation. These are not truths that you're meant to just believe. The idea is to find what Rupert is pointing to in your own experience, and then you can let go of the words, because they then become irrelevant. And he said the understanding, beautiful saying, the understanding is in the space between the words. And that's really important. So the idea is to listen to the words and to find the myself to which the words are referring. And each chapter explores different aspects of that myself. So if we ponder the implications of each of the things that he says, what we discover very often is that we, at some point, will come up against some kind of fixed belief about myself, and that we need then to question the validity of that belief, because this is really the path of no belief. I think Melissa said something very, very interesting when she was on the webinar. She said that she thought the book would raise more questions than it answers, and it should do, because that's what the teaching is really all about. And there's a lovely video of Rupert's, which is it's on his YouTube channel, and it's called Questions create the teaching, and it's exact questions, no teaching. So asking questions is really good, and anyone's free to put questions on the chat or come on live, and that's fine.
Yeah,
So,
Jenny, thank you for that. Picking up those really those comments and the pointing of Rupert and bringing it forward. And also Melissa, she did a wonderful job also, as always, as a great co-host, and she follows the teaching as you do and as many here do. And that's one of the things I've always loved about your co-hosting is you bring some kind of background about the teaching that is really deep. It's a deeper clarity around it. So thank you for that.
So shall we start at the beginning of this chapter then?
Yep.
I always, the first sentence in each chapter always seems to be so profound and to sum up the whole of the chapter, and that's the case in this chapter, I think. And he says there's nothing extraordinary, complicated, or difficult about recognizing our essential nature and accessing its innate peace and happiness. And then he goes on a bit further down the second paragraph. Enlightenment is simply the thinning of the layer of thoughts and feelings that veil being, just as clouds dissipate to reveal the ever-present sky. And I wanted to say something about the nature of this veiling, because it's not the thoughts and feelings in themselves that veil being. It's when we identify with thoughts and feelings that our pure, unlimited being seems to become hidden or veiled. And what it reminded me of, the word veiling, was the 5 veils of Advaita Vedanta, and they're 5 layers of identification. So the first one is the body, and the second one is the life force, what animates the body. The third is the flow of thoughts and perceptions. The fourth is the reasoning mind. And finally, the fifth is the state of happiness. Anything that comes and goes is not myself. So if a state of happiness comes and goes, then that's not really myself. It's just a state. We have to go beyond states of the mind. So it's I think that's quite a useful way of looking at it. It's those thoughts and feelings which could only arise if we believe ourselves to be separate in one of those 5 ways that are actually the problem. But having said that, it's still helpful to discover our pure being first in the absence of experience. That's in the gaps between thoughts, so that it's still useful. But ultimately, thoughts and perceptions don't need to veil our being, to veil awareness.
Right. Yeah. And it's the idea that it's thinning, the idea that's expressed in the second chapter, where it talks about it's thinning the veil, or it dissipates, means that it's okay, that it's gradual. It's okay if it's this way, because people think, oh man, how do I get back in alignment, or how do I stay there, or why is it still happening? And it's because it is a seemingly gradual experience. It's a dissipation or a thinning that implies that.
Yes, yes, and really, I think there's two aspects to that. So the thinning comes initially when you stop feeling that you are a body or a mind, but you might still feel that in some way that you are limited, and then it's thinning. But once you have had that experience of pure being, it tends to be a bit more on and off, and then you will, suddenly the clouds will come again, and you will identify with the concept of being a separate entity.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
so it's both thinning in both senses, I think.
Right. Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
I mean, it's good for people to know that this is normal. That's really my only that thought on that. And there's I want to pick up Kazad uh, comment on at 1209 because it's relevant, and I think we should look at it right now. Kazad says, "What
right.
I thought Rupert has repeatedly said that happiness is not a state that comes and goes, but is our innate nature."
Yes, that's a very important understanding, and that, in fact, that is this fifth veiling is the state of happiness. It's believing that it's a state that comes and goes. But once you have recognized your true being, then with that recognition comes an understanding. Well, I already really knew that. I just thought of it in the wrong way. I already really knew that, and it never does. It's always accessible. It never goes completely. It just seems that sometimes you go back to being identified, but anything, just the tiniest thing, can remind you, and you immediately flip back to the understanding. No, I'm myself. I'm this pure, unlimited being.
Hmm. Yeah, it's a kind of a resting place when you're just in this quiet, private, quiet place. Oh no, I'm this. I am this, and there's no words of what this is. It's just the knowing of our being that has it becomes a visceral experience of itself.
Yes, it's always there. It's always available in the background. It's just that it can be covered up
Mhm.
sometimes by identification.
And let's see, Rick mentioned something at 1207 on page 73. Enlightenment. It seems real miracle is the very simple recognition and interest itself. That is, by simply noticing the heaviness or density of layers, thoughts, and perceptions is enough. Somehow, this innocent and sincere noticing seems to create a small crack or gap that starts to thin the experiential veil and reveal our essence. This recognition and interest, it's volitional, and appears to just happen always now. Some type of story or explanation occurs after the fact, but always now. From extraordinary yet very miraculous. Well, it's what you just said is beautiful, Rick. Thank you.
Yes. I think it's a
Awesome.
I, I think it's a very immediate thing rather than a thinning at that point. Once you've understood and recognized your true nature, it tends to be instantaneous that you go back. It's quite right that the suddenly noticing, and it takes you back instantly. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's just noticing or acknowledge. And would you say noticing and acknowledging? or
I
just,
don't think you need to acknowledge, because acknowledging, I think, maybe happens in the mind. It's just a silence, which it might be quite a short silence, but it's a silence which just arrives.
yeah,
And there might be an acknowledgement afterwards. Oh, I'd forgotten. I'd forgotten who I was, but that's not necessary.
yeah. It kind of, yeah, the noticing what happened. I mean, my experience is that just it's noticed and sort of acknowledged at like within the same millisecond.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So what else do we have on page 73? Terms. Oh, he talks about terms. I like this. This is important because what I feel what Rupert is doing and what I think is important for anyone that's interested to understand is that terms such as enlightenment, awakening, liberation have become so laden with association and misunderstanding that the truth to which they point is often overlooked. And that's important.
Yes, yes. And he says they tend to confer an extraordinary or exotic flavor on something that's very simple, and that can be a problem for people, because they think, oh, I've got to go to India, or I've got to meet a guru in white robes and things, and I need help from someone like that. And it's not like that at all. He says on page 74, far from being extraordinary or exotic, your own being is the most ordinary, intimate, and familiar experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what, the I don't, I would say the extraordinary part of it is that it's always available. It's always here, and it always has been, and it's always available for everyone. It gives us a way of living in this bodysuit, and not so pulled by the events and circumstances of the bodysuit, personal self. So it really gives us a new way of living and being in this human experience.
Yes, yes. And
One,
he goes on to explain that we don't need all the methods and traditions and customs of those Eastern cultures. He says all these are distractions, albeit refined ones, from the simple knowing of our own being, from which one must sooner or later return.
yeah, it does. I mean, I feel that that's one of the powers that if Rupert has a superpower, it's that he is gifted with a way of expressing these ideas to be very simple, and they don't always come in for everyone simple. So I recognize that as well, because some of his wordings, I've heard people say, "Oh man, I just can't. I just am not getting Rupert." And then 3 or 6 months later, they go, "Oh man, I love Rupert." So sometimes you have to open the filter a little bit in a way to bring him in. But for me, when I started hearing Rupert, it was right there. He was the same. He was like my DNA. Uh, he was the DNA I was looking for hearing, for bringing this in. And then the last paragraph on page 74, he says, however, beneath our thoughts and feelings and their expression in activities and relationships, we are all the same. I mean, that's an important statement right there. that we're all the same. I was on the bicycle this morning doing a 15-minute stationary bike, and I had this, I was just aware of the bicycle experience. I was aware of sensations and such. And for a moment, for maybe 10 seconds, I was just marveling that our awareness, the awareness that I'm having of Bill the body on this bicycle, is the same awareness as everyone's awareness. So it's not in any way different. That's what that sentence just said. We are all the same awareness.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
In that experience, we're all joining in the same awareness.
Yes, and not even a need to join, because we are one. We are one awareness. That there is one reality.
I knew you were going to. Yes. I knew you were going to catch me on the word joining. I just knew when I said that word that you were going to join. We were going to catch me on that. Thank you. Funny. Okay, so do we have any other questions on the board? Let's see. Comment from Rick at 1219 that all understanding is timeless and has absolutely nothing to do with a concept. I think this is too easily overlooked. At best, concepts can act as a mini bridge that seem to assist or help. Yeah, I agree with that too. I think concepts can be as a mini bridge, and then throw the bridge away, please. Yeah, burn the bridge.
Yes.
On page 75, do you have anything else that you want to pick up here, Jenny?
Yes, he says, sooner or later we see with absolute clarity that the peace and happiness for which we long above all else can only be found within our own being. And as a result, we return to ourselves from the adventure of experience. And what that doesn't mean is that we don't return to ourselves with no experience happening at all. It doesn't mean that we have to sink back into meditation for most of the day. You probably remember the end of the previous chapter. I think the other Jenny pointed this out. He said, in time, we're able to participate fully in experience without allowing it to veil our true nature and its innate joy. And I think that's very important. It doesn't mean that we have to go away from experience, spend hours and hours and hours every day meditating. It's not like that. Our being can shine through every experience that we have, whatever we're doing, whoever we're meeting.
Yeah. I think someone mentioned, one of the co-hosts, I think it was a man. I don't remember if you're here. I don't remember who you are, but he was kind of relating it to a drink of water. You drink a glass of water, and then the water stays with you until you need another glass of water, right? And you don't have to keep drinking the water for the water to have its effect or to stay with you.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's cool. And I get emails all the time from people commenting on the nourishment that is brought to their experience by just these book studies and speaking on these words of truth.
Yes.
Sort of a nourishment for, just as a we sort of bathe in these ideas of understanding.
Yes.
Yeah. He says after the three dots on page 75, the very next paragraph, third paragraph, what is traditionally referred to as enlightenment is not an evolution or development of our self. It is simply the revelation of the self that lies at the heart of all experience, irrespective of its content, the self we always and already are, but have overlooked due to the clamor of experience. And this is, this is another point that I think this paragraph makes, that Bill the bodysuit doesn't wake up. Bill the personal self doesn't wake up. And I think, is it further on in this same chapter where he talks about that? About John
yes,
Smith,
he does.
or King Lear doesn't wake up, John Smith.
Yes, it's on the next page, isn't it?
Okay.
It's on page 76.
Okay.
And he says it is awareness that loses itself in experience and seems to become a temporary finite self or person, and then returns to or recognizes itself again, just as John Smith veils himself with his own activity, seeming to become King Lear, and then unveils himself.
Yes.
So yes, I mean, once we've clearly recognized our true nature, experience no longer veils it, unless we forget and revert to our old identifications. But there's an important implication that he goes on to in the next paragraph, which is there is no such thing as an enlightened person. In other words, it's awareness that loses itself in experience. It's not a person that loses itself in experience. And the ultimate analysis, and there's not a person that finds himself. The ultimate analysis, there simply is no independently existing person in the first place to be enlightened or not. Neither the Buddha nor Ramana Maharshi or Meister Eckhart was enlightened. And I think that's very important. No one has a monopoly on truth. There's no person, all of whose words are spiritual words which speak the truth. It's the truth comes from awareness only, and it's not just truth that comes from awareness. Everything else comes from awareness. Identification comes from awareness. Lies come from awareness. Truth also comes from awareness.
Yeah. And that's important because we give a lot of we give emphasis, or at least in the teaching of different progressive paths, like the Course gives, and sometimes non-dual teachers will give attention to the term ego, as if the ego is some activity that's occurring separate from the experience of awakening. And the ego is like it's really nothing. it's an idea that it doesn't have any input at all.
Yes, it's a awareness playing the game of ignorance.
Yes.
I think we talked about in Perfume of Silence, didn't we?
Yes. This is why I feel, Jenny, that it's so important to keep the attention on the truth as awareness.
Yes.
Keeping the attention there, and it sort of turns into an abiding place.
Yes.
Yeah. It says, if we pick up the fourth paragraph, did you highlight anything on the fourth paragraph, Jenny?
Just to be established in our true nature implies that experience has lost its capacity to veil its reality.
Yes,
that is it. And then he says in the next paragraph, our self is unconditioned, unqualified being. know yourself as that.
Yes, yes. And that's why these weekly book studies or whatever, and we're loosening the body mind, or we're loosening, awareness is loosening the body mind's hold on its remembering or its recognition, I would say.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, let's see. Do we have any other questions? I do love this. Susan, thank you for that comment. It was Jonathan Robinson on the podcast, the Awareness podcast that we started, that said the thing about the water. He's a brilliant guy, has a podcast called the Awareness Explorers. And we started a new podcast with the Teachers of God Foundation called the Awareness Podcast. He was my guest and mentioned that thing about drinking the water. So thank you, Jonathan. You're not here, but give you credit for that. What else? T500 says they really like, I don't know who you are, but they really like our coordinating colors this week, Jenny. Funny. We did not talk first. Grab this sweater, and we've done this a few times. That's funny. Okay, what do we have on page 77?
All right. Yes, I think this is important. It's not necessary to change or get rid of any particular experience. We may be deeply depressed or madly in love. We may be walking down the street or drinking tea. Our self shines brightly in the midst of all experience, irrespective of its content. And I think that's so important, because sometimes people think when at the beginning of a meditation, often Rupert will say, just be knowingly yourself. And that doesn't imply that we have to be thinking I am or thinking myself. We can be thinking about something else entirely, because being knowingly myself is beyond all thought. When our attention is focused elsewhere, then that being myself appears more like a kind of peace which pervades that thinking or activity. So it's an absence of misery, or an absence of any sense of lack or any fear.
Right. Well, and one of the things that can be very helpful is to have to read something that is of that nature, that what shines in the background of all experience is always shining. It's never not shining. And just to have that said can be helpful for people that are having an overwhelming experience of pain or anxiety. And I was doing a Q&A on Sunday where someone was mentioning that, and just maybe hearing that the shining is always occurring, even if you can't see it or feel it or sense it, it's still occurring. And that will become more of an pervading experience as we stay established, I think. I don't think it, but I know in the truth. That will become a stronger experience. And I think Rupert mentions it in this chapter even.
Yes, he does. And, feelings arise sometimes, like if we're late for an appointment, then there's sort of agitation which occurs in the mind and the body, but you can still sense that peace that's underneath, even though you're aware of the agitation as well. They're both there together. That peace is always there.
Yeah. And what you were saying a few minutes ago, even, I mean, the ego is not, it's awareness disguised,
Yes.
sort of disguised as it's divested as this idea that Freud called an ego, and of course we picked it up in psychology, but it's not, it's nothing. Yet it is coming from awareness. It is awareness expressed as this seeming separate idea.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. I like in the last paragraph on page 77, in the middle of the paragraph, if our being seems to be obscured by experience and is, as a result, not clearly known, then all that is required is to soften the focus of our attention from its content and allow it to come back to ourself. The self returns to itself and recognizes or knows itself again.
Yes, and what he's referring to is to sink down into that silence, that gap between the thoughts, where below all experience. And he says, soften the focus, so you're not focusing on anything. You allow experience to be on the surface, and you sink down, like sinking down to the bottom of the ocean, where it's always quiet and it's always peaceful. And that's a way back if you have difficulties, and often people do initially. People do have difficulties sometimes if circumstances are not what they enjoy, then they have difficulties coming back. And that's a good technique for doing that. Come back to consciousness without objects, awareness without the objects of experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's actually what happens by itself when you soften the focus. What I do, I mean, what happens, I've just noticed it is when the hand goes on the heart, there's a softening that happens. And I don't know how that becomes automatic, but somehow it does. And it reminds me of the essential nature as awareness. And now it's in charge. It's
Yes.
consciously in charge.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
On page 78, I want to flip the page.
Yes.
We turn to page 78. What do you have on 78, Jenny? Anything that stands out?
Yes. Well, he starts by saying we cannot become what we always and already are through any kind of practice, nor need we. And I think that's very important, because often people who come from a progressive path, they've been doing lots of different practices. I know I did when I was on a progressive path, masses different practices, and you imagine that those are necessary for enlightenment, but they're not. And that's what he's explaining. And then he goes on to talk about the sense of lack, and I think that's really important, because generally when people set out on a spiritual search, they don't realize they're searching for what they already are, although in fact that is what's going to give them what they want. They're much more likely to say, I'm searching for peace, for happiness, for fulfillment, to become everything that I can become. But what lies behind all of those goals is the sense of lack. Something is missing. Life could be better, or I could be better. And he says, if we look for ourselves in the content of experience, we'll never find it, although all experience is pervaded by it. And we're never going to fill that sense of lack, because whatever sense of lack we do manage to feel, another one will pop up. It's the recognition that we can't find what we're looking for in the content of experience that's really important. Myself is that which is aware of all objective experience, so it can't be an object within experience. It's that within which experience arises.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's the thing that's looking. it thinks it's going to be out there, yes. And it's really looking for itself.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have a hand up. Krista, would you please unmute your mic?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good.
Welcome.
I have a question, and Rupert writes several times, "Our self shines brightly in the midst of all experience, irrespective of its content." And in the at page 81, he writes the same thing. We find the peace and joy that accompanies all experience, irrespective of its content. Normally, I can find this peace in the ordinary experiences as drinking tea and so on and so on. That is, and also my own feelings regarding myself, as if someone hurts me and so on. Okay, I find this peace. But when I see an animal suffering and what we do to them, and when I look at a picture with people, refugees, and crossing the middle, the sea and drowning and so on, I cannot find the peace and joy and the silence in these experiences. Then they trigger me, and I'm back in sorrow and thinking, what can I do? And I know I cannot do, I know, but it doesn't help me in the situation. I feel so sad. And I would like to hear your comments, maybe now or when you come to the last page. But I would really like to have shed some light at this, because we are all, and Rupert always talk about, drinking tea and all these. Oh yes, that is easy enough to find the peace there. Yes, thank you.
I do understand that. It's very natural for us to feel sad, or sometimes even horror at the way people and animals are treated. It's entirely natural. And obviously, if we are in a situation where the animal is right in front of us, then maybe there is something we can do about it. But most of the time, that's not really the case. So, as you say, there's nothing we can do about it. You're not going to feel joy in that situation, but I think the way forward is looking at what is it that is feeling that sorrow. What is this sorrow? And the sorrow is thoughts in the mind, and it's very natural feelings in the body, particularly feelings in the body. And it's very natural for those to arise. But that which is aware of them isn't doesn't lose its peace. It's eventually. I don't think this is something that happens very quickly, but at some point it does happen. It doesn't lose its peace, because the peace is not a state of the mind. The peace is underneath the mind. It's underneath the thoughts about the poor animals, and the feelings in the body, which relate to your horror about the suffering of those animals. But it's underneath all of that, and it's finding what's underneath that. But joy, I would say no, not in those circumstances. I would change. I'm afraid Rupert's sentence in the paragraph towards the end of this chapter, which you refer to, where he says peace and joy. I would say. Or I put an or in there, peace or joy. Some experiences will be joyful, in others you will just experience the peace.
Yeah, and I would say thank you for that. I really appreciate your clarity on that, Jenny, and thank you for the question, Krista. I would say that this is the whole purpose of staying immersed in these ideas and the understanding, because what will happen is we'll still be compassionate, and we'll still have feelings for things, for injustices, but the emotions of those injustices, that are really built on believing that we're this bodysuit, will not be in charge of our experience. And even though we may not feel the happiness or the joy in that moment that we're experiencing the bodysuit, the personal self identity, it's still, just as Rupert said a few pages ago, it's still shining in the background of our experience, and will be resting back in that place, not so pulled by it. And I feel if we're supposed to do something in that experience that we're witnessing, the intelligence of compassionate awareness will reveal itself and move the personal self body mind to be involved, or at the very least, it will find a resting place where it's not suffering. That's my thoughts on it. I hope that's helpful. Let's move on. We have about 10-12 minutes left, and let's look at page 79.
Yes, on page 79, Rupert says, for many people who feel their essential being and its innate peace and causes joy are not present, the first stage may be to undertake some practice in order to access it. So he suggests that for a few people, preliminary practices such as mantra meditation or focusing on the breath might be helpful, although he goes on to say that those practices are very rarely necessary now that the direct path is available to everyone.
Yeah, I like that. Usually you don't see Rupert or Francis mentioning practices, so I like to see it in writing, and also that to don't hang on to the practice. Just use it for where it's helpful, and I think that's what it happens with the progressive path. The progressive path is helpful for practices, but the problem with practices is they become rituals, and we have a sense that they seem to bring us to a temporary step, and we don't want to stay on that step.
Yes, they can very easily lead us to a point where we're still under the fifth veil, so they can bring us to a happy state. So mantra meditation can certainly bring you to a happy state, but that's a state which comes and goes, and that's not what we're really looking for.
Yeah, we want to be on that. We want to be on that, in that space that anything can happen.
Yes, yes.
And we can still recognize, we can still know the self that keeps us from suffering.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Mm.
Well, you want to look at page 80 now, Jenny?
Yes, yes.
Oh, excuse me. We have a couple of hands up. Let's grab
right.
those hands. I think we have
Yes,
time
yeah.
for a quick question. Judy Yeomans?
I do have a question. In previous videos where I've watched Rupert and talks about self-inquiry, when I was listening to the lady who was feeling the emotion of sorrow with the animals, the practice of self-inquiry is to look at where that feeling is coming from. But is self-inquiry really necessary if you recognize the aware of itself? Is there a need in any respect for self-inquiry?
For almost everyone, I think a certain amount of self-inquiry is necessary, and it's really to do with fully appreciating and understanding the unlimited nature of ourselves and the total interconnection with everything, and also to really feel all the implications of that. So you can go an awfully long way, really, as you've said, without any self-inquiry, or your teacher can take you to that place within yourself. But to really become established there, and to become completely independent in a way of your teacher, I think it is necessary to do some self-inquiry, but mostly it's around the understanding there is only one awareness. It's not that my awareness, myself, is separate from anyone else's self, or different from anyone else's self, or even connected with. There is just one self. The course that Bill was talking about, we did together before. We had a theme for it. It was a 1-year course, and it was, there is only one being. And just that statement has the most enormous implications. So really this path is about getting seeing these glimpses, understanding those glimpses, but then really pondering the implications of them. Another one which I used, which was unbelievably powerful and has so many ramifications, is that we don't choose our thoughts. And really seeing what that means, seeing there's no guilt. There's no guilt in myself. There's no guilt in anyone else. There was no guilt in Hitler. It has the most extraordinary repercussions, and that is self-inquiry. But it's something we do for ourselves, and we don't do it mechanically. Self-inquiry should never be mechanical. It's our own questioning of our own deepest experience.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jenny. And I would also add that it's, it's really for, and I've read it, Rupert say it, it's self-inquiry is for self-discrimination. It discriminates the object from the subject so that we can see the object of experience that comes and goes. So self-inquiry is really a way for discovering in whose behalf is this occurring, so that it suspends the logging in or the attachment, or it brings you back far enough where you're no longer identifying as the object.
It gives you certainty about what you can be certain of, and certainty of what you cannot be certain of. You can be certain that it's impossible to be certain of things, which is, and that's equally important. And self-inquiry gives you both of those things.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you. Sylvia, we have about 5 minutes left, and then we'll pick up maybe one more passage from this chapter.
Okay, just real quick. If Buddha and Ramana Maharaji were not enlightened, would you say that they were pure awareness then, coming from pure awareness?
Well, we all are pure awareness. There is nothing that is not pure awareness. There was no difference between Buddha and Ramana Maharshi and us. There is no distinction. So if we really understand that there is only one reality, there is only one awareness, then the way to look at it is it's almost like, imagine a huge, great patterned carpet with all sorts of very intricate, tiny little patterns. And so each body-mind is just a tiny section of the carpet which is totally interconnected with all the others and totally affected by all the threads that are running through the carpet from everywhere else. There's nothing about a body mind which says this body mind is enlightened, or this body mind is always pure. No, I mean, the teachers make mistakes. Teachers sometimes say things which aren't right. You can't assume that everything a sage says is correct. If he's not a living sage, then you may not be interpreting it properly, and you can't really question him on it. But even with a living sage, if it doesn't match your experience, if it doesn't touch your heart, then leave it. That's important.
Yeah, I think I appreciate that distinction. It's a really good question, Sylvia, and I think we'll pick it up next week. We're going to meet for an hour for what would be Rupert coming. We've changed for next week will be Q&As, and we have 4 pages of comments or questions that you have sent in, or that you've had in the chat over the last 7 chapters. So we'll be looking at that, and we can pick this up again. And thank you for the question, Sylvia. So looking at the last couple of pages in this chapter, page 80, I was looking at the 3rd paragraph down on page 80. It says, the unveiling of our essential self is sometimes accompanied by a relaxation of tension in the body and an expansion of the mind. These experiences may be pleasurable, but they are temporary side effects that may or may not occur. They may be extraordinary, but they have nothing to do with the recognition of our self or being. And Jenny, I thought this was important because I think, sometimes we see teachers or we see statements of extraordinary experiences at this dimension, this happened at this level, or this happened at this dimension. And it's like a carrot that's not really important. and it's only a temporary passing cloud. And I think it's really helpful when Rupert gives a paragraph, a statement of what that sort of implies.
Yes, exactly. And again, it's really referring to this fifth and last veil that I mentioned earlier, the veil of happiness. Any state that comes and goes is not what we're looking for. It's not the pure awareness that brings peace and joy.
Yeah, right. And I think we're at the end of our time, everyone. It's 1 p.m. Eastern, and we'll pick this back up next Wednesday when we have a free hour for Q&A. We'll be looking at some of the questions that came through that you guys have typed in. We've captured them, and it'll be fun. So thanks for being here, and thank you, Jenny, for being an awesome co-host. And Jenny will also be our co-host next week, and we'll take questions.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all for being here. We'll see you next Wednesday. Have an awesome week and weekend.
Thank you.
Oh, I think Super Bowl. Is this the Super Bowl weekend?